What happens when one reckless moment turns into the reason a husband vanishes without a fight? How does a man who never raised his voice manage to destroy a woman's life quietly, with papers instead of shouting? And why did I keep telling myself it was just fun when the silence he left behind said otherwise? My name is Clara Wynne, and I used to say I wasn't like other wives. I said it half joking, half proud, like being restless made me interesting. I told people I wasn't the jealous type, that Elias was lucky to have someone who didn't nag or cling. The truth was, I liked attention, the way people looked at me when I laughed too loud or moved too close. I told myself it was harmless, just proof that I was still desirable after 7 years of marriage and 1 child. Elias never complained. He was quiet, steady, the kind of man who thought before speaking. Sometimes I took that silence as weakness. I thought if he didn't stop me, it meant he didn't care. He worked long hours, always came home tired but gentle, never raised his voice. I told myself I needed more fun, more spark, something to remind me that I wasn't fading into routine. That night at the club was supposed to be nothing. A few drinks, some music, a break from being the responsible one. My friends teased me about being married to such a serious man, and I laughed along. Elias didn't even want to go, but I insisted. I said we needed to act our age, not like an old couple with a mortgage and a bedtime. When the stranger, Liam, I think his name was, pulled me onto the dance floor, I let him. It was crowded, dark, full of flashing lights and loud music. I could see Elias standing near the bar, watching. Part of me wanted him to see. Part of me wanted to prove I could still get a reaction. When Liam's hand slid under my skirt, I should have stopped him. I didn't. I laughed instead. I told myself it was a joke, just a moment, nothing real. But Elias's face didn't change. He didn't shout or cause a scene. He just turned, walked out of the club, and never came back that night. When I got home hours later, he was gone. His ring was on the kitchen counter beside a folded note that said, "I won't compete with your games." I remember staring at those words, waiting to feel scared or guilty. Instead, I told myself he'd cool off. He always did. But this time he didn't. And the silence that followed wasn't peace. It was the sound of something ending, too quietly for me to notice until it was already over. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. The night at the club started as a joke, the kind I always thought I could control. My friends had been teasing me for weeks, saying I'd turned into a homebody. They said I'd forgotten how to have fun since getting married, that I was acting older than my age. I laughed it off, but inside, I felt something hot and defensive. I told them Elias and I just had different styles, that he liked quiet, and I liked life. When they suggested we all go out together on Friday, I said yes before even asking him. Elias didn't want to go. He never liked loud places or crowds, and he said we didn't need to drink to have a good time. I rolled my eyes and told him he sounded like someone's father. He said, "Maybe that's because I am one." I told him to stop being dramatic. Eventually, he gave in, the way he always did when I pushed long enough. We got there around 10. The music was so loud I could feel it in my chest, the lights flashing fast enough to blur faces. I loved that feeling of not having to think, of just moving. Elias stood near the wall with a drink, half smiling, half enduring. I told him to dance, but he shook his head. I said, "Fine, then watch how it's done." My friends and I went to the floor, laughing and spinning under the lights. The air smelled like perfume and alcohol and something electric. Then a man I didn't recognize started dancing near us, tall, confident, with that careless grin that meant trouble. He introduced himself as Liam, shouting over the music. I smiled back, pretending not to care that Elias was watching. Liam leaned close, said I had energy. I laughed. I said my husband didn't like to dance. Liam said that was his loss. It happened fast. A touch on my waist, a laugh too close to my ear, and then his hand sliding under my skirt as we turned. I froze for half a second, just long enough to see Elias's face across the room. Calm, expressionless. I told myself it didn't matter, that I hadn't done anything. I laughed, pushed Liam's hand away gently, and made a joke to cover the moment. Everyone laughed too, like it was nothing. Everyone except my husband. When I turned again, he was gone. Just gone. No shouting, no goodbye. I thought maybe he'd stepped outside for air. I waited a few minutes, then went looking for him. The parking lot was empty. His car was gone. I told my friends he must have gotten tired. They told me not to worry. I laughed it off and stayed for another drink, pretending I wasn't embarrassed. By the time I got home, the house felt different, too still, too neat. His shoes were missing from the hallway. The kitchen light was on, and his ring sat on the counter beside a folded piece of paper. My name wasn't even on it. It just said, "I won't compete with your games." I stood there for a long time, reading it over and over. I wasn't sure whether to be angry or scared. Compete with what? A little flirting. A joke. I told myself he was overreacting. I poured a glass of water, looked around the quiet kitchen, and decided to wait until morning to talk it out. Except morning came, and he didn't. His side of the bed was cold, his toothbrush gone. I called his phone. No answer. I texted him, "Can we talk?" No reply. I waited another hour, then another. By lunch, I called my mother. She answered on the second ring, cheerful as always, until she heard my voice. "What did you do now?" she said, half joking, half serious. I told her he'd left after a small argument. I didn't tell her about the club, about Liam. She said men always needed time to sulk, that Elias would come crawling back once he realized I wasn't chasing him. "Don't feed the drama," she said. "Let him miss you." So that's what I did. I didn't call again that day. The next morning, I woke up to silence and a text from the bank. "Your joint account has been temporarily restricted." I called the branch, thinking it was a mistake. The woman on the phone said the restriction had been placed by the primary account holder, Elias. My name was still listed, but only as secondary. She said he'd provided documentation. I hung up before she could explain. That's when panic began to replace anger. I went through the drawers, trying to see what else was gone. His passport, some files, even the photo of us from our wedding, gone from the frame in the hallway. I told myself he was being petty, but my chest hurt. I sat on the edge of the couch, staring at my phone, trying to think of what to say. Everything sounded wrong. By afternoon, I drove to my mother's house. Tara opened the door and frowned the way she always did when she thought I was about to ruin her day. I told her Elias had frozen the account. She gasped like it was proof of some betrayal. "He's trying to control you," she said. "He's punishing you for being independent." I said maybe I'd gone too far, that he saw something at the club he didn't like. She waved her hand. "Then that's his problem. You're allowed to have fun. You didn't cheat." That word, cheat, felt heavy even though I hadn't said it. I told her it wasn't like that. She nodded, already pouring wine. "He's one of those men who thinks love is ownership," she said. "Don't let him scare you into guilt." For a few days, I let myself believe her. I stayed at her house, called in sick to work, told friends Elias was taking space. Every time someone asked if we were okay, I laughed and said, "Of course, he just likes to be dramatic." But at night, when I tried to sleep, I kept seeing his face in that moment at the club. So quiet, so sure. By the fourth day, an envelope arrived at the house addressed to me. Inside was a letter from a law firm. Notice of intent to file for legal separation. Elias Wynne versus Clara Wynne. My stomach twisted. There were words about financial protection, custody planning, preliminary mediation. I didn't understand half of it, but I understood the message. He wasn't coming back. I called him immediately. This time he answered. His voice was calm, low. I asked if this was a joke. He said, "No, Clara. The joke was the marriage." I tried to laugh, said he was being cruel. He said, "You've been calling cruelty entertainment for years." Then he hung up. I threw the phone across the room. My mother came running. When I showed her the letter, she said, "He's bluffing." I said, "He's not." She told me to stop crying, to remember who I was. "He needs to feel your absence," she said. "He'll regret it once you stop chasing him." But something in me knew better. He wasn't the kind of man who acted on impulse. He was deliberate. If he'd gone this far, it meant he'd planned it. 2 days later, he sent an email. Cold, formal, written like a business memo. It listed the steps of separation, the assets under review, and a proposed custody arrangement for Lily pending court approval. There was no greeting, no signature beyond his name. It ended with, "Please direct all communication through counsel moving forward." I stared at the screen until it went dark. My mother called it a power play. I called it war. That night, I drove back to our house. His car wasn't there. The driveway looked emptier than ever. I unlocked the door, expecting to feel relief at being home. Instead, it felt foreign, like a museum of someone else's life. I wandered through the rooms. The walls looked the same, but the air was colder. His jacket was gone from the hook by the door. The mug he used every morning was missing from the kitchen shelf. I went upstairs and opened the closet. Half of his clothes were gone, but the hangers were still there, empty, swinging slightly, as if mocking me. I found his old notebook on the nightstand. He used it to jot down things he wanted to remember, shopping lists, reminders for Lily's school. I flipped through it, searching for something that might explain this. The last entry was dated the night before the club. "Don't let her turn small moments into pain." I sat on the bed and stared at those words until the letters blurred. Then I did what I always did when I felt trapped. I called my mother again. She picked up on the first ring. "You sound awful," she said. I told her everything, the frozen accounts, the letter, the email. She went quiet for a moment, then said, "He's trying to embarrass you." I said maybe I had embarrassed him. I said maybe I'd gone too far that night. She sighed loudly. "Clara, you didn't do anything wrong. Men like him can't handle a woman who's not afraid to live." I didn't answer. I just stared out the window at the empty driveway, wondering if he'd ever pull back into it. The next morning, I woke to a message notification. My heart jumped, thinking it was him. It wasn't. It was from an unknown address with no subject line, just a link. I clicked it before thinking. The video opened to a grainy image of the club floor, flashing lights, people dancing. Then I saw myself, clear as day. Liam's arm around me, his hand sliding where it shouldn't. I saw my own face laughing. Then, in the background, Elias, standing perfectly still, watching. After a few seconds, he turned and walked out of the frame. The video cut off. My chest went cold. I clicked again, hoping it was fake, but the timestamp was there. The angle was from a security camera. Someone had pulled it, someone had sent it. I didn't need to guess who. I sat there shaking, the sound of the club's muffled music echoing in my head. It wasn't just about jealousy anymore. He was building something, quietly, carefully. I tried calling him again, but the call went straight to voicemail. I sent a message. "Why are you doing this?" No reply. An hour later, I got a new email. This one was short, only one line. "Documentation makes memory unnecessary." I didn't know what that meant then. I do now. That evening, my mother came over again. I showed her the video, expecting her to be shocked. Instead, she said, "You can't let him control the story. People will side with whoever looks calmer." I laughed bitterly. Then I'm already losing. She told me to hold my head high, to act like I didn't care. I said, "He's turning my life into paperwork." She said, "Then turn it into your story." But deep down, I knew she didn't understand. This wasn't about who looked right anymore. It was about who could stay quiet the longest. And for the first time in our marriage, silence belonged to him, not me. That night, I found another letter in the mail. This one was short and typed, from his lawyer. Request for mediation hearing, preliminary scheduling notice. I folded it neatly, placed it on the counter beside his ring, and whispered to the empty kitchen, "You won't win." But even as I said it, my voice didn't sound like mine. It sounded small, uncertain, and afraid. The house didn't answer back. Only the hum of the refrigerator filled the silence. The same silence he'd left me with that night at the club, one I thought would fade, but had instead grown into something heavy, permanent, and sharp. When the notice for mediation came, I stared at it for almost an hour before opening it. The envelope felt heavier than paper should. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from anger. I told myself it was ridiculous, that Elias was just trying to scare me, that he wouldn't actually go through with it. We had a child together, a life, a home. Surely he would calm down once he saw how foolish he was being. I showed the letter to my mother. She read it slowly, squinting, then shrugged. "It's just a threat," she said. "Men like him need to feel powerful for a while. Let him play his little lawyer game." I said he wasn't playing. I told her about the frozen accounts, the emails, the video. She frowned, still trying to sound confident. He wouldn't dare share that with anyone. He'd humiliate himself too. But I wasn't so sure. There had been something terrifying about the calmness in his voice the last time we spoke. Not rage, not spite, just certainty. A few days later, my mother insisted I come to the Sunday barbecue she was hosting. "It'll show everyone you're fine," she said. "You can't hide and let him control the story." I didn't want to go, but she was right. I hated the idea of people whispering. So I put on a bright dress, brushed my hair, and told myself I'd make it through the day by acting like nothing was wrong. When I arrived, the yard was full of familiar faces. Neighbors, cousins, my sister, and her husband. Everyone smiled too much, spoke too softly. They were all pretending they didn't already know. I laughed louder than I needed to, filling every quiet space with noise. Halfway through the afternoon, I heard someone say that Elias had moved into a furnished apartment near the office. Another person mentioned seeing him with a lawyer at the courthouse. I pretended not to hear. Then Marion, his mother, arrived. I hadn't expected her. She walked straight up to me, polite but firm, like a guest attending a meeting she didn't want to miss. She greeted my mother, who smiled tightly. Then she turned to me. "How's Lily?" she asked. I said she was fine. Marion nodded. "She always is. Children adjust faster than adults, as long as the adults don't keep lying to themselves." The people nearby fell silent. My mother crossed her arms. "We don't need your judgment here," she said. Marion's smile didn't change. "I'm not judging. I'm simply saying my son isn't crazy. He's just done." I tried to laugh. "Done with what? Being perfect?" Her eyes didn't blink. "Being disrespected." I turned away, pretending to check on the food. My hands trembled slightly, but I kept smiling. "She's always been like this," I told the others. "Blames me for him being miserable." But no one laughed. Even my sister looked down at her plate. Later that evening, after everyone left, my mother scolded me. "You let her get to you," she said. "You have to control the narrative, Clara. Don't give her the satisfaction." I nodded, but something inside me felt like it had cracked. Marion's words echoed in my head all night. "He's just done." The next morning, my phone buzzed with another unknown number. I thought it might be Elias, finally ready to talk. Instead, it was another email. No text, just a video attachment. My stomach dropped. It was the same footage from the club, clearer this time. I watched it in silence. The flashing lights, Liam's hand sliding higher, my face laughing. And in the background, Elias, still, silent, watching, then walking away. At the bottom of the screen, a small watermark read, Requested evidence, security footage archive 4C. My heart started racing. I didn't know if Elias had sent it or if someone else had. Either way, it was proof, undeniable, time-stamped, clean. My throat went dry. I called my mother, my voice shaking. He's collecting things. He's going to ruin me. She said, "No one will care about a little dancing, Clara." I said, "It wasn't just dancing." There was a pause. For the first time, she didn't have a quick answer. Finally, she said, "Then you'll just have to be smarter. Don't give him what he wants." But she didn't understand. He didn't want anything from me anymore. He was preparing to erase me, carefully, quietly, with signatures and proof instead of shouting. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the living room staring at my reflection in the dark window. I kept hearing his voice from the club night, calm, disappointed, saying, "I won't compete with your games." By morning, I'd made up my mind. I was going to find him, face him, fix this. His office was in a small industrial park on the edge of town. When I walked in, the receptionist looked startled but polite. I told her I was his wife. She hesitated, then said, "One moment," and disappeared behind a door. A minute later, Elias appeared. He didn't look surprised to see me. He looked ready. He said we could talk in the conference room. I followed him in. The room was neat, empty, except for a table and 2 chairs. He gestured for me to sit. I started first. "You've made your point," I said. "You've embarrassed me. Can we stop this now?" He folded his hands on the table. "I'm not trying to embarrass you." "Then what is this?" I said, my voice rising. "Freezing accounts? Lawyers? Sending me videos?" He didn't flinch. "Documentation," he said. "I don't like confusion. You've spent years confusing me. I just want clarity." I laughed weakly. "You sound insane." He tilted his head slightly. "Do I? I haven't yelled. I haven't lied. I haven't even spoken about what happened publicly. You're the one telling everyone your version." I swallowed. It was nothing, a stupid moment. You're blowing it out of proportion. He looked at me steadily. "You told our friends I left because I'm controlling. You told your mother I can't handle attention. You called what happened fun. So now I'm making sure the truth isn't something we debate." His voice never got louder than a whisper. That somehow made it worse. I tried to change tactics. "We can fix this," I said. "We can go to counseling. For Lily's sake." He nodded slowly. "I agree she deserves stability. That's why I've already filed for shared custody, with primary residence under my care. You can visit every other weekend." My mouth went dry. "You can't do that." He looked down at the table. "I already did." I stood up so fast my chair scraped the floor. "You're cruel," I said. "You're trying to punish me for one mistake." He looked up then, his eyes sharp and calm. "I'm not punishing you. I'm just protecting what's left." I didn't know what to say. My throat felt tight. I whispered, "You're enjoying this?" He shook his head. "You enjoyed it. I endured it. Now it's my turn to be calm." Then he reached into his bag and pulled out a manila folder. He slid it across the table. My name was typed neatly on the front, Asset Division, draft copy. Inside were spreadsheets, account statements, even photos. Each page was dated, organized, deliberate. My laughter echoed faintly in my ears, the same one I'd used that night at the club, the same one I'd used to dismiss his discomfort. I pushed the folder away. "You're humiliating yourself, Elias. Everyone will see this for what it is, spite." He stood up, buttoned his jacket, and said quietly, "Spite is messy. This isn't." He walked out of the room before I could speak again. When I got home, my mother was waiting with Lily. She took one look at my face and said, "What did he say?" I told her everything. The papers, the custody threat, the way he'd spoken like it was all already decided. She said, "He's bluffing. He wouldn't take a child from her mother. Judges don't do that." But I saw doubt flicker across her face. That night, I barely slept. Every sound in the house made me jump. I kept checking the front door, half expecting him to show up and tell me this was all a test. But he didn't. The next morning, a courier arrived with another envelope. Inside was a notice for the mediation session, officially scheduled for next week. My mother told me to dress well, stay composed, and show confidence. If you cry, you lose, she said. If you shout, you lose faster. Be charming. Make him look cold. I nodded, but it felt pointless. Elias wasn't playing a game I understood anymore. The day of mediation, the office was bright and sterile. The air smelled faintly of lemon polish. Elias was already there, seated neatly at the table with his lawyer. He looked calm, professional, almost distant. When I walked in, he stood politely, but didn't smile. "Clara," he said, acknowledging me like a stranger at a meeting. The mediator explained the rules, her voice neutral and soft. Then Elias's lawyer began, listing the evidence, financial documents, photos, messages. My chest tightened when I saw the folder marked video exhibits. I wanted to tell them to stop, that none of it mattered, that I wasn't some criminal. But my lawyer whispered to stay quiet. When it was my turn, I said it had all been exaggerated, that the video didn't mean what it looked like. I said marriage was complicated, that we'd both made mistakes. I even smiled at Elias, trying to appeal to something human in him. He didn't blink. When I said he was trying to destroy me, he finally spoke. "You destroyed yourself. I'm just filing the paperwork." My lawyer kicked me gently under the table to keep me from reacting. The mediator asked if we could reach an agreement. Elias said he was prepared to finalize within the month. He wanted the house liquidated, accounts separated, custody shared but structured. Everything sounded rehearsed, clean. I couldn't take it anymore. I turned to him and whispered, "You don't even look angry." He said, "I was." Then I realized anger keeps people connected. I don't want that anymore. Those words hit harder than shouting ever could. When it was over, the mediator thanked us for our cooperation. Elias stood, shook hands with everyone, and left without looking back. I stayed seated long after the room emptied, staring at the empty chair across from me. For the first time since that night at the club, I realized there was no fixing this. He hadn't left in anger. He'd left in clarity. And that was worse. Outside, the sky was overcast, the air heavy. I stood in the parking lot, clutching my bag. My phone buzzed with a new email notification. From him. I opened it. There were no words this time, just an attachment, a scanned copy of the signed custody petition, and beneath it, a line of text. "You laughed when I left the club. I'm just finishing the scene." My hands shook so hard I almost dropped the phone. That night, back at my mother's house, she told me to delete the message and act unbothered. "He wants you to look weak," she said. But I wasn't weak. I was hollow. Every sound, every shadow, every silence reminded me of what I'd done, and of the man who'd stopped competing long before I realized the game was over. The court date came faster than I expected. Weeks blurred together, filled with signatures, documents, and the quiet hum of people treating my life like a case file. Every time I thought about calling him, I stopped myself. What was I supposed to say? I didn't mean it. I just wanted to feel something. None of it mattered now. The story was written, and I wasn't the author anymore. The morning of the hearing, I woke early. The house was cold, still, the kind of silence that feels intentional. My mother insisted on coming with me, but I said no. I couldn't bear another speech about how men always overreact. She still didn't get it. Elias didn't overreact. He planned. I wore a plain black dress and tied my hair back. I wanted to look serious, stable, maybe even remorseful. But mostly, I just wanted to look like someone he could forgive. When I arrived, he was already there. Of course he was. Elias always arrived early, as if being on time meant control. He stood beside his lawyer, talking quietly. When his eyes met mine, He didn't look angry or even cold, just composed, like this was an ordinary appointment. The hearing room was small. The judge reviewed the documents, her tone calm and detached. I sat across from him, my heart pounding. When she read aloud the grounds for separation, I wanted to interrupt, to say that it wasn't what it sounded like. But Elias didn't look at me once, not even when the video evidence was referenced. My lawyer whispered that it was fine, that judges rarely watch those clips in full. I nodded, staring at the table. When it came to custody, my stomach twisted. His lawyer presented his plan: structured visitation, stability for Lily, shared holidays. He even included a note about keeping her school routine uninterrupted. It was flawless, the kind of plan a good father would make, a responsible man. I couldn't argue without sounding selfish. When the judge asked if I had any objections, I said no. My voice sounded small in the quiet room. Then came the division of property. He didn't want the house. He didn't even want spousal support. He said calmly that it should go to me. For a moment, I felt hope, some sign that maybe he still cared. But then he added, "I don't need it. I just don't want anything tied to her name." The words hit harder than I expected. At the end, the judge asked if either party wanted to make a statement. I thought he'd decline. Instead, Elias stood and said, "There's nothing more to say. Everything I needed to prove is already documented. I just want peace." The judge nodded. Papers were signed. Stamps were pressed. And just like that, 7 years of marriage ended with a sound softer than a sigh. Outside, I followed him into the hallway. "Elias," I said. He stopped, waited. I stepped closer. "You really think this makes you free?" He looked at me then, really looked. His voice was even. "No, it just makes me honest." He walked away before I could reply. I drove home in silence. The sky was grey, heavy with rain. Every streetlight reflected off the wet pavement, like something too bright to look at directly. I thought about the way he used to drive, his hand steady on the wheel, his quiet humming when he thought I wasn't listening, the kind of calm I used to find boring. Now I'd do anything to have it back. When I got home, the house felt unfamiliar. Lily was staying with my mother that night, and the emptiness made every sound echo. On the kitchen table sat an envelope, hand-delivered, no stamp. My name written neatly in his handwriting. Inside was a short letter. "Clara, this isn't revenge, it's closure. You said you wanted excitement. I just wanted peace. Now you can have both, in your own ways. Lily will always know you love her. I'll make sure of that. Take care. E." I read it 3 times. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't even cold. It was final. I sat there for a long time, the house silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. The sound reminded me of him again, how quiet he'd always been, how that quiet had once made me feel unseen. Now it just made me feel haunted. That night, I went upstairs to our old room. Half the closet was still empty, hangers swaying gently. I lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling. I tried to remember the last time we'd laughed together without edge, without performance. I couldn't. Every memory I had of him lately ended with my voice louder than his. Sometime after midnight, I got up and opened the top drawer of his old nightstand. Inside was a folded photograph, me, him, and Lily at the park. We were smiling, real smiles, the kind that come from somewhere warm. On the back, written faintly in pencil, were 4 words, "Before it went wrong." I didn't cry. I just sat there holding it, thinking how small those words were for something that had destroyed everything. The next morning, the doorbell rang. I opened it expecting a delivery, but it was Marion. She stood there in her neat grey coat, eyes soft but unreadable. "I just wanted to collect Lily's things," she said. I nodded and stepped aside. She moved through the house like someone walking through a museum of memories. When she reached the living room, she paused, looking at the photo still in my hands. "He didn't do this to hurt you," she said. He did it to survive you. I didn't answer. I couldn't. She packed Lily's bag in silence, then stopped at the door. For what it's worth, I hope you learn to stop laughing at pain, she said gently. It doesn't make it smaller. Then she left. I stood in the doorway, watching her car pull away, the sound of tires on wet pavement fading until there was nothing. Later that day, I walked through each room of the house slowly. The kitchen where I'd laughed too loud. The hallway where his shoes used to sit neatly by the door. The living room where he'd read to Lily while I scrolled through my phone. Everything looked the same, yet everything had changed. On the counter, I noticed another envelope I hadn't seen earlier. Smaller, unmarked. Inside was a photo, still from the club video. The same one. Me laughing, Liam's hand where it shouldn't be, Elias in the background watching. But this time, there was writing on the back. You said silence was boring. I made it permanent. I sat down hard, the air leaving my chest. It wasn't cruel handwriting. It was careful, steady, deliberate, like everything he did. I placed the photo beside the first letter and stared at them until the afternoon light shifted and the room dimmed. I didn't move for a long time. When the clock hit 6, I went to the kitchen window. The street outside was quiet, just the faint sound of distant traffic. I imagined him driving Lily somewhere calm, somewhere clean, where his quiet wasn't punishment but peace. I whispered, "You won, Elias." But even that didn't feel true. He hadn't won. He'd simply stopped playing. I spent the evening cleaning, not because it needed it, but because I needed to do something. I wiped down the counters, folded the towels, straightened the couch cushions. Every motion felt mechanical. When I finished, the house looked perfect. Too perfect. Like it was waiting for someone who wasn't coming back. Before going to bed, I opened the window and let in the night air. It was cold and sharp, the kind of air that made everything smell clean. I stood there a while listening. No music, no laughter, just stillness. That was the last thing he ever gave me. Stillness. And in that stillness, I finally understood. His silence hadn't been revenge. It had been freedom. He'd just found a way to live in peace while I was still trying to prove I wasn't the villain. Now the house is quiet every night. I make Lily's breakfast in the morning, drive her to school, come home to the same silence. Sometimes she asks when Daddy's coming over, and I say soon, even though I know our visits will never feel like home again. But when I tuck her in, I remind myself that at least one of us got what we wanted. I wanted excitement. He wanted peace. We both got exactly what we asked for. Only one of us could live with it. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching.